Hello and welcome to Middlebury 5-0. I am your host, Officer Chris Mason, and with me in the studio today is Patrick Berry. Welcome to the show, Patrick.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And you're the Vice President of Philanthropy at the Vermont Community Foundation.
That is correct.
Did I get that right? That is an awesome title.
Isn't that great? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking like a cross between kind of Joe Biden and Gandhi is kind of what flashes through my mind.
I wish that was that cool. Yeah.
So what does that mean? What is Vice President of Philanthropy, and what's the Vermont Community Foundation?
Let me back up to what the Community Foundation is,
Yep.
and then talk about what I do. I think that it'll make sense.
Sure.
Everybody, a lot of people in Vermont know a little something about the Vermont Community Foundation, but they don't know the whole picture, and oftentimes they are wondering, what it is we actually do. And I like to think of it as three distinct areas that we focus on, and that kind of helps frame it for people.
Right.
First of all, we support Vermont's nonprofit community with, actually this year, it looks like we'll be over $17 million in grants out to Vermont, nonprofits, many in Vermont, some outside Vermont, and I can get that in a little bit too. So through those grant rounds, through folks who like to give to nonprofits give through us.
Right.
And we also allow nonprofits, we help them with investments, we allow them to invest with all of our assets, which basically gives nonprofits access to world-class endowment returns that they wouldn't get otherwise on their own. That's the first thing, supporting nonprofits. The second thing is serving as a conduit for charitably minded individuals that like to give. It's a lot easier to create what's basically a charitable checking account where you can put in a larger amount of money, let's say, if you like to give a lot during the course of the year. And there are a whole variety of different ways you can give through us to various nonprofits. So supporting those individuals. And then the third thing we do is trying to provide philanthropic leadership around the state. What does that mean? It means trying to inspire giving from individuals or institutions and supporting communities, kind of trying to be the rising tide that lifts all of Vermont's nonprofits and communities. And with that leadership work, it could be the report we just issued called Understanding Vermont, which identifies 11 different issue areas where we see really important trends that people should know about. And it's designed to be a resource for people who like to give, for philanthropists, to help them understand where they can make an impact. We'll host events trying to convene nonprofits who might need support and folks who might want to support them, traveling around the state, doing shows just like this to say, support your local nonprofit community.
Sure.
So that leadership work is what truly separates us from all of the other different ways that you can give.
Right. Yep.
Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and very concise, and that was beautiful.
Well, it's a diffuse thing, right? What do? We give out money. Well, what else do you do, right? Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, giving money to organizations, I think, I would have been inclined to think of that as a fairly straightforward thing. You have some money, you give it to someone, and boom, mission accomplished. But obviously, it's a lot more complicated than that. Like if you have that kind of money, if you have resources, you want to make sure that they do a lot of good. That they do.
Well, here's what's important is that the minimum size that we recommend for, let's say you want to set up a charitable checking account with us, right?
Yep.
It's called a donor advised fund because you're advising where the money goes. You're the donor. The minimum we recommend is $25,000. But here's why: even if you shouldn't perceive of this as being a resource for folks with significant means. It's for anybody that feels philanthropic. Is that, well, first of all, there's a lot of value add when you give through us as opposed to writing checks on your own. Number one, we take care of all the administrative work, and instead of, let's say you give to 10, 15, 20 different organizations every year, each one of those you've got to put on your taxes to, look at, what you may get, for deductions. But when you give through us, your deduction is made on the one-time gift, and then we take care of everything else, right? You just we've got this online portal where you can go to, and with a few clicks of a button electronically, you can decide who you want to give to. So there's the administrative end of things. There's also a lot of value add. We do a lot of research around the state looking at where those trends are. I just mentioned the report that we identified, or that we just came up with, and from that we'll identify important issue areas. Sometimes they're regional. We have a Northeast Kingdom Fund where we know that that's an area in the state that really struggles and could use a lot of help. Or an issue area, we have a food and farm initiative because we've identified that locally sourced food, also dovetailing with impact on hunger is important, and we feel like by bringing a lot of charitable resources together, we can make a difference. So we'll identify those issue areas, and we also offer basically full service philanthropic advising. You can meet with anybody on our staff that may have expertise in an issue area. Let's say, I really care about supporting women's issues. Well, my colleague down the hall, works for the Women's Fund who could help you do that. Or conservation and environment, I have background and I can help identify different nonprofits. So there's real one-on-one helping you make an impact. And so those are the bread and butter of why, even if you don't have a lot of resources, a lot of folks still give through us. And I'd say the last reason is that people love Vermont, and we're all about trying to make this a better place. And even though you do pay a fee when you give through us, people would view that fee as a part of their annual charitable contribution, basically supporting the work that we do to help nonprofits.
Right. So it is. There's charity as a part of it, but I love the fact that community is right there in the name, and really is kind of the essence of it. So,
yeah.
That's got to be really the focus of the organization, for it to be so kind of front and center, I would think.
We're incredibly lucky in Vermont that community to us means something a little bit more intimate. So community, there are community foundations for, let's say, Jacksonville, Florida, and Dallas, Texas, and et cetera. And they view that as their community, and there are certain areas, whether it's the arts or hunger or the elderly or workforce training or whatever it is that may be important to them, that where they've identified a community. For us, we don't realize often how lucky we are. We have this tremendous sense of place. People really look out for one another. They look to connect with one another. So our ability to support community, even on the local scale, can make a big difference. For example, we gave a grant to the town of Hancock to help them develop a town green, just to give that. I mean, it's a small town. It's been struggling economically. I believe that their school was maybe one of the first schools that actually officially closed. But just to help them create that sense of place and that gathering place in their community where, hopefully that could make a difference for them. So small things make a difference.
Yeah, and because that seems like the essence of so many things. If you talk about health, if you talk about, and not just like physical health, but mental health, a sense of well-being, health in the broadest possible sense, happiness, even joy. That is so much rooted in a sense of connection, a sense of involvement, a sense of being in it with people, with your neighbors, and connection with those people as well.
I think there's a real sense of satisfaction among not just my colleagues, but the folks who work with, hoping and believing that you can actually make a difference when you're supporting these nonprofits.
Yeah.
So
that's what you're building. That's,
my colleague who has the office next door has a little sign on her door that says joy. Right?
There you go. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it seems rarefied, when you start talking about joy and happiness. It seems fairly philosophical, but I think a big part of it is that connection.
I mean, and there are clearly a lot of challenges that we have that are facing the state, and we're trying to be able to have an impact and make a difference, trying to help the folks that give through us feel that sense of joy, that sense of impact, that sense of accomplishment, that their giving is making a difference. And we're in the process right now of taking this Understanding Vermont report and hosting some events in different places around the state where maybe they don't know us quite so well. So Rutland County, Bennington County, Lamoille County, et cetera, to try to let folks know what we're working on, learn more about what those important issues are where people live, get feedback about that, and hopefully expand that sense of community and our grant making, and build a bigger family of folks that work through us.
So I don't know if you know this, but several years ago I applied for a grant, a small and inspiring grant.
Gosh, I hope you got one.
I did. It wouldn't be a very good story if I'd been refused. You turned me down, and now it's payback
what
time.
What am I going to say? Right?
Yeah. So you gave me this grant. It was a kind of a micro grant, $500, and my goal was to use that money to promote the show. So what we did with the money was we bought T-shirts. So this is one of the T-shirts. that we bought Middlebury 5.0,
Yeah.
and we give these exclusively to guests.
Really?
Yep, as a reward for coming on the show and being grilled by Officer Mason.
Well, I was looking through your guest book, and you get some really good guests on your show too.
Great guests.
Yeah. You're still getting good guests, right?
That's right. Yeah, you're keeping the keeping the bar high. So this is your gift.
Oh,
I'm going to present this to you.
That's outstanding.
Yep.
Right on.
Paid for through.
Yes, actually,
Vermont
I'm not sure I can
Community
actually
Foundation
accept this, right? Because this would have been a grant to support the work that I'm doing at my
It's
organization.
it's very kind of meta and
right,
circular
right.
and yeah.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that it was Small Inspiring grant that you got.
It was,
right?
yes, exactly.
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean there are, and I think this is important for folks to know. I mean, there are over 30 different competitive grant rounds for grants that we give. I mean, a lot of the money we give out is through individuals where they get to advise where the grants go, but we do have a pool of discretionary money.
Yeah.
And Small and Inspiring is one of those where we're looking for ideas just like this. And I'm actually really glad you brought that up because I think when most people think about supporting nonprofits through grant programs, they're thinking of the larger institutions in the state. And I'm going to refrain from naming any, but folks know who, good, important nonprofits are, either, mental health or conservation or hunger-related issues, food banks, et cetera. I mean, that's where people think, but we are serving our fund holders, the folks who give us through us, much better when we have this greater diversity of really interesting grant ideas. Because we do have some of these grant programs are really put together, these portfolio of grant opportunities, as a service to folks who give through us. So nobody else gets the Small and Inspiring and the innovations and collaborations and the special and urgent needs. Sometimes we'll just do it through because we're trying to help people quickly. But that's a great way to get some coverage for different smaller, institutions looking for help, and it's a great way to introduce yourself to folks who like to give through us as well. So it's a good message for any small nonprofit, any municipality or school or somebody that has a great story to tell. We love great stories, and has a compelling project that fits into any one of those different grant opportunities. And it's great too because you basically go to our website and there's click of a button and there's a page that outlines the different grant opportunities and what the guidelines are and what kind of grants we're looking for.
Yeah, because it was the only grant I've ever applied for. I've never applied for a grant before, and it was really straightforward. It was really easy to do.
It's incredibly rare that anybody's batting 1,000 for raising money. So if this law enforcement career doesn't work out, right? You got, you have a backup plan.
That's right. That's good to know.
Yeah.
So you say the money comes from people within the state, or is it?
Well,
is it broader than that?
It's broader than that.
Yeah.
So I have helped folks from different places around the East Coast, who they either know of us and they love the work we do, so they want to give through us. They were from Vermont. Their parents live here. They've got a second home. They've got a connection here, and they want to help. They want to support Vermont institutions, but they don't really know enough about what's going on in their county, in their issue area. So we're a great place for that because either you'll get one of these portfolio of grant opportunities where you can say, oh my gosh, I never would have thought of that. That's a great opportunity. Or, because you work with a philanthropic advisor, you can call one of us and say, hey, I'm looking for some really, compelling grant opportunities in, Orange County, and, we'll be able to help you out. So that's important too.
So you mentioned that you like stories. So I'm eager to hear, what are some of these. What are some of the grants? What do people ask for money to do? Anything's on the table. Anything you like, anything odd or peculiar or just beautiful and inspiring, anything delicious.
You should have a follow-up program with some of my colleagues for two reasons. That you originally asked, and I'll get to answer your question, but you originally asked, so what do you guys do? If you're the Vice President of Philanthropy. And we do work with individuals, but most of what I do is my team and I help execute the transactions, helping nonprofits set up funds, for an endowment or helping individuals. And we work less on the programming side, where I mean, my colleagues are amazing. What they could tell you about nonprofits in parts of the state or issue areas of those stories, they're the ones that put together these grant portfolios. And of course, we're always trying to absorb information in everybody to learn what those great stories are, because it's why you go to work every day. But boy, they've got some really good stories. What I will tell you though is that there are incredible stories that we have come across in almost every issue area you could imagine, including things you wouldn't expect, like really fascinating arts programs, in the most remote parts of the Northeast Kingdom,
right?
Or small community projects about where folks are looking to build social capital. In other words, build that community and that sense of connection.
Sure.
In our food and farm initiative, they're usually there's multi organizational grants where they really build collaboration. Farm to school, farm to plate. Also working with food banks. So, in almost every one of those issue areas, in almost every part of the state, there are those really compelling stories. But I am going to hang it on. You have to have my colleagues back, because they could the level of detail they could give you about those stories compared to the superficial having an understanding is I just couldn't do justice. I mean,
Sure.
you get all choked up about all the really amazing stories that they could tell.
Yeah. So it seems to me that there is something very special about Vermont. There may be many things that contribute to that. That atmosphere, that quality that the state has. And one of the things is, and you kind of touched upon this a little bit, but I've lived in a lot of different places. I've done a lot of traveling. I've lived in some big metropolitan areas. I've lived around DC, spent some time close to San Francisco in the Bay Area. And moving to Vermont, I assumed that I would be sacrificing a lot of that kind of cosmopolitan atmosphere. So a lot of the things I valued about town life, city life, and such as the art, I felt like I would be giving up coming to Vermont, and it was worth it to me still. But then I arrive here, I'm living in Middlebury, and I find that I'm surrounded by that stuff. I live in a small town, and it seems like everywhere I turn there are artists doing innovative things. There are musicians. It's the richness of this place is incredible, and really incredibly sophisticated people as well.
I guess is a little bit distinct from the conversation we've been having, but
right.
We're all in it together. These communities are small enough, right? So you mentioned I grew up just outside of Washington D.C.
Yep.
And there are the poor neighborhoods and the middle class neighborhoods and the upper class neighborhoods.
Absolutely.
And they all have their own post office and their own shopping centers and their own grocery stores, and you never have to get outside of that bubble. Right. So there's not that sense of connection, We have one post office where everyone has to go, and there are two grocery stores, and and this is a big town. Middlebury is one of the biggest towns in the state, right?
Right. Yeah.
But there's a sense of personal accountability, right? When you drive around, you're not likely going to lay on the horn and make some obscene gesture, because that could be your next door neighbor. You don't know, right?
Right.
Or your colleague,
Yep.
right? Or it's just So I think that folks are more conscious of being in it together is the way I tend to think about that, and I think that that creates a sense of cohesion. It wasn't an accident that after Tropical Storm Irene, which, by the way, the Community Foundation gave away over $4 million in 6 months supporting those efforts.
Right.
That everyone just helped each other out as though, well, that's what you do. And it seemed to be these incredibly compelling stories outside of Vermont, the way folks all pitched in together. And I remember in East Middlebury, Middlebury River jumped the bank and ran down 125 and flooded the basements of most of the houses there.
I remember that too. Yeah.
Yeah, but everybody,
water,
I had about 1,000 feet of extension cords and a generator and a sump, and we just some of us just went around, everybody helping one another out. Or the what was it, the Valentine's Day blizzard from a few years ago.
It was just before my time, but yeah, people still talk about it.
It wasn't like no one was gouging. There was a couple people on our street that had tractors with front end loaders. It wasn't like they were out there charging the elderly $100 to clear their driveway because they could. They did it for free because they're it's your neighbor. And so that neighborliness extends pretty far. And even Burlington is a small enough city that there's accountability. You're going to see people. You're going to want to be don't know, you're going to want to be accountable. You're going to want to treat people the way you want to be treated because you're going to see them again.
That's right.
So that I think that's one thing that special, distinctive. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of rural parts of the country where you see the same thing. It's just that we have an entire state that's like that, and maybe that's the difference.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah. So what are the problem areas? What are the things that the Vermont Community Foundation is really targeting? The things that are challenging that cohesiveness, the things that are kind of pulling us apart and isolating people.
Well, like I said, I mean, this report we've identified 11 areas, and I'm not going to go into all those different areas. And it depends on your perspective what the challenges are, right?
Sure.
And I mean, thankfully, every nonprofit feels like what they're doing is going to be the most important thing to make a difference in Vermont, and that's a good thing. You have to believe in that work if you're an advocate for some issue area. I mean, obviously, something you probably deal with is opiate addiction. And substance abuse is something that's definitely tearing apart many communities. That's something that's identified. The fact that we're an aging state and we haven't grown in population challenges you not only in terms of making sure you're taking care of the elderly, but it connects also. These are all interlinked to the need for workforce training, to have younger folks coming up being properly trained for hopefully whatever jobs may be available, which is also linked to economic development challenges, and everything is connected to one another. And like I said, one of the things we're trying to do with these events is get a sense regionally where helping support a specific issue really might make a difference, because it really depends on where you are in the state.
Right. I like what you said about that kind of interdependence,
they're all connected,
that interwoven kind of, and I see that a lot in law enforcement. I'll deal with someone and maybe there's a crime there, but you push a little bit harder, you go a little bit deeper, and you find out that poverty is a part of it, addiction maybe is a part of it, maybe there's a mental health component, maybe this person was traumatized, maybe there's a really significant bad experience that they had that's kind of stayed with them and is influencing them. So it tends to be this web, this network of issues. And I think you're right, they're all connected and they all kind of feed upon each other. So I think it's great that there's such a kind of multidimensional approach to these issues that are multidimensional. It's refreshing.
Yeah, and they're also, they're connected to both the built natural environment in which we live as well. And two of the areas identified, water quality, which I think we realize is drinking water and places to recreate are, well, the first, if you look at what's happening in Flint, Michigan, is absolutely critical.
Right, and you see that brown water.
It's crazy. Yeah. Can you imagine? But it's fun. Like, granted, we don't have a drinking water problem, but in parts of Lake Champlain, we have a crisis. When you have blue-green algae blooms where you cannot swim because there is a health threat. I mean, we've got major issues that are all connected. And if you look at the economy of the Lake Champlain Basin is very much connected to the health of the lake and the people to enjoy it and recreate, et cetera. So that's connected to the economy, which is connected to all those other things. Forest fragmentation is another one, and for some folks it's kind of a head scratcher, but if you look across Vermont, we have first of all, Vermont is 80% privately owned, like the forest resources, right? But those larger tracts of land are becoming increasingly parcelized. In other words, they're getting cut up into smaller and smaller and smaller sections. Well, why does that matter? Well, with climate change, which we know is sort of an overriding factor for a lot of the different challenges we have, there will be critical importance to maintain wildlife travel corridors, to be able to migrate to different areas throughout the state, because a lot of the ecosystem and forest species is some which are going to migrate north, as will the animals that thrive in those systems. So it's about ecosystem health and integrity. But here's another part. It's also about the economy. It's about the forest economy. because if you create these smaller parcels, or you're forced to, with rising taxes, you're forced to subdivide and sell, then you're diminishing the value of a forest resource. In a state that prides itself on having a sustainable working landscape between farms and forest lands, you're diminishing the economic value of your forest resources as well. So there, again, everything is tied together in even ways that you may not imagine, and that's what we're trying to do is for now at least, give an update on what we're viewing as really important trends, letting folks know what those issue areas are, and then slowly, as we continue with the process of rolling out this report, identify ways that we can, hopefully make an impact ourselves as an organization.
Sure, it's so complex.
It's really complex.
Yeah.
And it depends on where you live,
Right. Yeah.
And I've always said too, I've always thought, 251 towns, each one is like its own little civilization with its own identity, its own sense of pride, its own sense of community.
Absolutely.
Right? And each one will have its own challenges. So, the challenges that, Virgins is facing are different than the challenges that Bristol's facing, even though it's just a, quick trip down the road.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's been absolutely fascinating listening to you, Patrick. It's been great having you on the
Thanks
show.
for having us on.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And I feel enlightened. And I feel inspired too. I mean, obviously there's a lot of issues, but it's heartening to me to know that you're out there and you're doing what you're doing.
Well, we, hopefully more folks will become involved, and we're a heavy volunteer state too, so that's good. But we need to spread the word about what we're doing in different areas of the state as well, to get more people involved.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, hopefully we can get your colleagues
to
come on the show and they can share their
They're way
stories.
more interesting than I am.
Okay, so until next time, drive safe, and may all your mischief be of the lawful persuasion.